Living my bucolic life, we have three city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. We're going to start another project today, and this one is pajamas. I put a little question on my Facebook group, I need pajamas, gave a couple of options, and this is the one that got chosen. I am going to be doing the shorter version of the shirt, which is still pretty long, but sleeveless, and the pants. And it looks like the pants are just, you know, very simple with an elastic waist. So we should be able to get through this whole thing really quickly. This does call for knits. It says moderate knits. I'm going to be using a lightweight knit, you know, just because I want it to be comfortable. And it is a very, very bright and busy print, you know, because I can. So here it is, you know. I don't think that you can get much bolder than that. Lots of flowers, black background, stretch knit. So I'm going to be using my typical size 16. The pants, like I said, they're just pull up with an elastic. It's the top that has some detail here. It's got some, they're kind of like darts, kind of like pleats, I think, but it should be pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and get it cut out, and I will be right back. Okay, so it's time to talk about modifications. And my body, you know, everybody is different, and my body has a very high waist. I mean, my waist wants to be under my armpits. It is so high, and because of that, when I'm making pants, you know, store-bought pants are a nightmare, but when I'm making pants, I always have to lower the crotch, or else, you know, uncomfortable things happen. So I'm going to show you on the back piece here what I'm going to do. The exact same thing I'll be doing on the front piece. There's this double line up here in the top region, okay? That is the lengthen and shorten here line, and I will definitely be lengthening there. So just because these are pajamas and I want them to be super comfy, I'm usually lower it by an inch. I'm going to lower it by 1.5 inches because we just don't need any kind of trouble. So what I do is I just cut it at that point. And you can kind of see on my grid down here where I separate it by 1.5 inches. So I need to get myself a piece of tissue paper, a little scrap piece that I can put underneath here so that I can retape my piece down and have a single piece from my 2 that I have here now. So I've got my little scrap taped onto my top part. I can see my camera battery's almost dead, so I'm going to make this quick. I'm going to line up this printed line here on the grid underneath it. That looks good. I'm going to put a weight on there to keep it where it should be, okay? And now I'm going to, by looking at my grid underneath, or you can get a ruler, which would probably be a good idea, just to double check that it is asymmetrical, 1.5 inches all the way across. You know, unless your body does interesting things and you don't need it symmetrical, that is up to you. Then I just go ahead and tape the bottom part on, and I'll have this added, and I'm going to do that for both of my pant pieces. As far as the top piece, it is knit. It doesn't have a definite bust point, so I'm not going to worry about changing darts or anything like that. I'm just pretty much going as is, except They do have you button all the way down the front. I'm going to do mock buttons, which basically means I'll sew buttons on there, but I'm not going to do buttonholes. I'm just going to sew the thing closed because it's got a deep neckline, and so I can pull it over my head like a t-shirt, you know, and I just don't want to worry about buttons coming unbuttoned in the middle of the night. So there you go. I just want to point out one last thing. The length of the pants as is going to be way too long. They have their finished length here is 41 3/4. So that's including the hem that they have. So I held that up, it's way too long. I actually need my finished length to be 38 inches. So 41 3/4 plus the 1.5 inches that I added up top gives me, you know, over 43 inches. I'm going to call it 43.5 just for ease here. So that means that I need to cut off 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say 5 inches. No, you know what? Let's say 6 inches. I don't want these to be too long. If they're a little higher and my ankle might show, that's okay for pajamas. But I'm going to take 6 inches off the bottom of each of my front and back pant pieces. So to do that, I am just measuring from the raw edge down here at the bottom up 6 inches, making a few marks. And that's going to be my new cutting line right here. Okay, so I've got all of my fabric pieces cut out, and I wanted to tell you how I'm going to put this thing together. The general, not the general consensus, but a lot of people like to use sergers to sew their knits, and I think that if you are going to do that, as long as you have at least a 4-thread serger so that you have a reinforcement stitch and then another one in with your overcast, you should probably be okay. I'm actually going to use a regular sewing machine. In fact, I'm using a very old, since my fabric has roses on it, I'm using Rose. She's a 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐿. She's probably about 130 years old at this point. But I'm going to be using her, just a straight stitch machine, and I can work that stretch in as I go, and I think that's going to be just fine. Yes, I could go back and serge all of my edges. I'm not too sure if I'm going to do that yet or not, you know, but I just felt like getting her off the shelf and putting her on the treadle stand, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to get started with the pants first, get those out of the way because I think that's the simpler garment and I can get used to how she's going to react to the knit. I did put a ballpoint needle in her, so we should be good. Once I get the pants done, then we'll go ahead and get started with the top. But the pants should not take very long. It's literally just a couple seams and elastic. So let me get those pieces out. All right, so looking at the pants instructions, we're going to get started matching up one back to one front. And it looks like they're going to want you to do a double row of stitching. So what that means, you're going to do one at 5/8 and then one set in, you know, about 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch. Do they see? They say, oh, this is fun. I've never seen this before. In their instructions, they say, see the video. So they don't even tell you anymore in their instructions what exactly they mean. They give you a little code to scan and go look at a video. I think that's interesting. I mean, how hard would it be to say do one at 5/8 and one in 1/8 of an inch or something? Anyway, I digress. You know, I guess modern times call for modern measures. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, get a front piece 7 and a back piece 8 and pin them together at the inner inseam. And in case you're wondering where I got this fabulous fabric, I got it late one night at Walmart. You know, they have a fabric aisle with a whole bunch of little rolled up pieces, and I saw it and I grabbed it, and there you go. Now on, if you're ever going to do that, on the roll, just their standard print says 45 inches wide. This is way wider than 45 inches wide. It's closer to the standard 60 inches, but you know, it's Walmart. What do you want? So let me go ahead and match right sides together, my little inseams for my short little legs here. and I will do my 2 rows of stitching. So this is Rose. She's the one I'm going to be using, and if you have any of these old machines, a lot of times they use old-fashioned needles, which in general are a longer needle than the standard needle. But for her, for my new home, for a lot of them, I have found that you can use a standard needle. You just set it slightly lower in the little clamp so that, you know, the final length is the same, and that works fine. So that's why I have a modern ballpoint needle in her right now. So she's the one I'm going to be using today. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if you haven't seen, I'm just going to show you quickly how this is going to work on her. And then what I do now is what I'm going to do for all of her seams is I just take a few stitches, and because, you know, no reverse on these girls, I lift the presser foot, move everything over, and get started again, okay? And then I am just going to hold my fabric somewhat firm. I'm not stretching it. I'm just holding it so that it's not going to want to wrinkle up or anything like that, and just do a regular seam all the way down. So here we go. So just like that, and then when I come back, okay, so I've got my first seam here. When I come back, I will do my second row using the edge of my presser foot as my guide, and that's going to set me in about 1/8 of an inch or so. It's not really critical that it's exact. It's more just for reinforcement to make sure that, you know, it's stretch knit, and if a seam pops, there's a secondary one over there. So anyhow, at least that's my opinion. I'm going to finish making my 2 seams, and I'll meet you back at the table. All right, so we're working with 2 separate pant legs here still. And so what I need to do now is the outside seam. Okay, so I'm going to do this row of stitching just like this one over here. Okay, so it's doing right here. The next step will connect the 2 different legs, but we'll do 1 row of stitching out here at 5/8, the next one in about 1/4 inch on both of the pant legs. Okay, so now that I have both seams done on my pants, what I've done is I've turned one of them right side out and stuck it inside. Okay, so I have my 2 inseam areas kind of matching up here, and then my outer ones, you know, are hanging out where they are. What I need to do is sew this whole crotch seam. And let's see here, I did not mark which is the front and which is the back. The back side is always a longer seam than the front, but it's curling up on me here. So I could figure that out. I did not mark my notches either. I don't know what has gotten into me. Okay, so I can tell leaning this like this, this one is shorter, so that is the front piece, this is the back piece. I'm going to be putting my seam allowances down here, both of them towards the back, just because I choose to. Honestly, you could put one up and one down. I don't see a problem with any of that. It's an inseam in pajamas or lounge pants or whatever. Actually, I might just do that just for funsies. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and pin this whole seam together all the way up here and here, and we're going to sew this exactly the same way with the 2 rows of stitching, you know, 1 at 5/8 of an inch and then 1 set in just a little bit more, holding it fairly tight but not, you know, stretching it, just holding it tight as I go, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I got that done, and I wanted to show you, yes, there are stretch stitches on sewing machines, and they're in general like zigzags that are like several steps each way. Work great and everything. And if you have one of those on your machine and you want to use it, fabulous, fabulous. I'm just doing it this way because that's how the instructions say, and also to demonstrate that you can use a straight stitch machine. Now when you do it on a straight stitch machine, let me see. Can you see how it gets kind of bumpy because I'm working in a little bit of stretch as I sew, and so they're not perfectly straight, they're a little bumpy. That's just the nature of it and everything. So what I would say is use your own judgment. Use your own judgment. This will work. It's not the most beautiful. The stretch stitches work great too. If you have one, fabulous. If you have a serger, fabulous. You know, you do you. This is me today. You know, I do things other ways too, but this is just the way I choose to do it today. So these pants are almost done. I just need to go ahead and get to the part where we're putting in the interfacing. Now, before I actually turn down the top to make the, not interfacing, elastic, but before I turn down the top to put the elastic casing in, they are suggesting that you stitch down 1.5 inches at each of the seam allowances so that the seam allowances won't get in your way as you're trying to feed elastic through, because that's kind of a nightmare. Like if this is your seam allowance and you're trying to push something through like that, it's getting stuck and everything. They suggest basting it. I'm going to use Stitch Witchery. So let me go over to my ironing board. I need to turn my iron on, get my Stitch Witchery out, and we'll deal with these seam allowances. Okay, so here is my seam allowance. I'm actually using a piece, what is this, probably closer to about 3 or 4 inches long. I'm just tucking my little piece of Stitch Witchery underneath here, and I'm going to iron it. As you can see, I've got some steam going here, just long enough to melt all of that, so that now this is going to stay. Well, the bottom part is going to stay. The top part, remember, got that. What am I going to do with that? What am I going to do with that? You know what? Just because I'm feeling a little bit lazy right now, I'm going to stick another piece of Stitch Witchery underneath that little flap. I probably could have pinked it or something to get it out of the way. All right, so now nothing's going to come up. Sorry about that steam. So let me go ahead and do that to all of my other little seam allowances here, you know, so that on the outside it's nice and flat before I make my casing. Now the Stitch Witchery, it stretches, it's fine. It's just a fusible glue so that when I have my nice little casing, everything will slip through nicely. Okay, so to form the casing, what they want you to do is turn this down. They say 1.25 inches. I'm going to do 1.5 inches because I like big casings to feed my elastic through. Let me grab my pins here. Okay, so once I have it turned down my 1.5 inches, then turn up the bottom edge 1/4 inch or so, and I'll pin that into place here. Okay, so then I can remove my top pin and go on to the next seam allowance and do the whole thing over again, and then just, you know, hit the high points in the middle. When I sew this one, I am going to try to put a lot of stretch into it. So since I'm on my straight stitch machine, what I'm going to do is put my stitch length pretty short, but I'm going to stretch it fairly aggressively, and so my stitches should end up incorporating all of that into it. We will see, but that's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to leave an opening, you know, about so big near the back, probably not at the seam, but off to the side just a bit, just because that'll be easier to feed my elastic through. Okay, so if it was in the middle of a zombie apocalypse and my survival was determined on if I could make stretchy pants with this machine, could I do it? The answer is yes, I could, but I'm not happy with the way that it's looking right now with the stitches. She does not like the stretch. She does not like a lot of things like that. She's fabulous on wovens, but we're just going to say thank you. Thank you for your service, little Rose, because, you know, it's always good to get them out and used every now and then. But I am going to switch back over to Pearl. You know, she's lovely. She's got a little bit of a zigzag, so I can work some of that in. You know, I know exactly what she's going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and run that seam around my casing on Pearl over what Rose did, because Rose was skipping some stitches, you know, which is just the nature of the beast. But let me redo it with her, put a little bit of a slight zigzag onto it, and I'll meet you back at the table. Okay, so back here at the table, I have cut a piece of elastic that's the size of my waist. I don't really even want to show you my seam because it's so ugly, because I had a row of skip stitches and then a zigzag over it, you know. But thankfully it's a very busy dark colored fabric. No one's going to see it. If this was really for show, first of all, I probably would have used a serger on the edges. And also I would have pulled out my bad row of stitching, but it's my pajamas, so that's okay. I did fold up and stick one of my labels in the center back just so I can tell easily what the back is. So there's that. So now I'm going to use my bodkin, clip it onto this piece of elastic here, and thread it through the casing. Just like so. And I'm going to make sure that I don't twist it as I go and that I don't let the end pop back in. So I'm just going to come over here with this end before I even go too much farther and pin it to the other part of the fabric so it won't pop in. Okay, I will be right back. Okay, so this is a pretty thick elastic here, and because of that, I'm just going to butt the ends together using a scrap of fabric. So basically I put one piece here, you know, zigzag this piece onto the fabric, then put this piece here and zigzag it to the fabric, and then I can just fold these ends over. I'll do it and then show it to you so it'll make more sense, but that way there's not a whole bunch of thickness, you know, and it seems to slide around easier that way. Okay, so that's what it looks like. You know, it's nice and strong. You can fold the ends over and stitch those if you'd like to. I'm not going to stitch them, I'm just going to fold it over like that. And then let this whole thing pop into place. I guess I could have trimmed them a little bit more. Maybe I'll do that. Hang on a second. Let's trim that so it looks a little prettier. Because why start with aesthetics now? Oh well, okay. All right, so cutting off that bottom one so it looks a little bit prettier when I pop it in. There we go. So now I'm going to go ahead, turn this under, and finish my little seam around the bottom right here. And then the only thing we have left to do on these is hem up the bottom of the legs. Okay, so with that done, remember I shortened these before I cut them out. So at this point, all I need to do is turn up a hem. I don't even know if they specified a hem size because I cut that off of the pattern down there. But what I'm going to do, you know, this is not going to fray. I'm just going to turn it up, you know, about 1/2 inch, and then kind of do a smaller zigzag type thing just straight across. You know, turning it up once is fine for this purpose. If you want to get even more fancy, you can turn it under and then turn it up. You know, that's great too. But for me, that's going to be good enough. And I'm going to do that on both legs. Okay, so you know, just a little zigzaggy thing at the bottom. That's all it is, but you know what? It works. So my pants are done. I'm going to set them aside and get my top piece out, which I actually skipped over here. Okay, so it looks like what we're going to need to do is get started on piece number 1, and they want you to stay stitch all of this knit. You know what? Instead of stay stitching, I'm going to be using a fusible stay tape. Let me put my pants up, flip you over to the ironing board, and I'll show you what I mean. I just got over here to my ironing board, and look, I did not realize I had done this. When I cut this out, at the very bottom edge down here, this is my front piece. I have an issue. So you know what? Thankfully, it's pajamas. What I'm going to do is just, you know, on this side only, this side will be just 1/2 inch shorter than the other. You know, right there. I don't think it's the end of the world, but I should have paid closer attention to that. What I'm going to be using to reinforce this, let me raise you up here. See these long slices that are taken out? Okay, pretend that we're looking at the wrong side of the fabric. What I'm going to use is, I have this inch-wide fusible tricot. It's very soft. You know, if you really pull it, it will stretch, but it's stable enough, it will hold its own. And so, you know, again, pretend you're looking at the wrong side. What I'm going to do is lay this all the way up each side of each one of these little slits that are cut here and fuse that on, okay? And that's going to make it a lot better for matching up and everything. And for me, on a knit, especially a knit that's being as ill-behaved as this can be, doing this instead of trying to stay stitch without stretching, because that's the whole point of stay stitching, is that you're locking it in place at a set size. So to put stay stitching into a long strip of a very stretchy knit is just difficult for me. So, you know, that's my option. There's other ones too. You don't have to use this. There's other fusible tapes. This is just my choice for this type of fabric. So putting it on is actually really easy. I just leave it attached to the roll up here. I start at the top and just fuse a little bit. Okay. Once that is stuck, come down to the next part, and it does flex somewhat, so I can, while I'm holding the iron there, kind of bend it around to the next location. And I'm coming down to about 1/2 inch or so beyond the very bottom opening, okay? So that then I can just come down here and clip it off. And I don't know if you can see that, but that's really nice. It's gonna hold its shape, but this stuff is light enough and soft enough, it's not going to make it stiff like interfacing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of it here. Okay, I am going to actually mark my dots and everything now, because I use a heat erasable pen, and you know, marking that before I iron it just is pointless, literally. So here is the ends of my little strips here. Okay, on the pattern piece, they have stitching lines, which are 5/8 of an inch from the edge. So I'm not really going to mark the stitching line itself, because I can just use the guide on my sewing machine. But these 3 little dots, I'm going to go ahead and punch those out with my little punch here. And these 3 here. Okay, and getting a heat erasable pen. Let's see here, I need to line this up. And I'm just, you know, because knit and the nature of it, it's kind of wobbly. There, hopefully you can see that. I'm just going to line up the cut bottom part of these little pieces here. So right about there, and that matches up with the armhole, maybe? Maybe? Yes, it does. Okay. So with this part here, a wrinkle, there. I'm going to go ahead and mark where these 3 dots are. This is right there. Okay, there it goes. So I have a center dot and 2 outer ones for each little section. And what we're going to do is basically fold these together and sew down to that dot on each one of them, okay? So I'm going to match them up, you know, starting on the bottom. I'm going to stick a pin down this dot and back up this dot just to make sure that they are lined up. Kind of like a dart, you know, and lock that in place, and then come all the way up here to the top and match it up. So I know those 2 points are good, and there really aren't any notches or anything in here, so it's just a matter of making sure that everything is going to work itself out. Looks pretty good. Pin this together, doing the same to the other opening here, you know, and then sewing it from top to this dot at 5/8 of an inch here, and well, when I get this one pinned, here on both front pieces. Now these curves are, they're slightly different angles, and so at the stitching line itself it's going to match up, but the curve is going to make the very edge a little bit ruffly. So in order to make all of that lay nicely, I'm just making some clips at about 1/4 inch. Don't want to go anywhere near that stitching line, but just clipping it at about 1/4 inch, it's going to flex enough that it'll lay nicely. If you had stay stitched it, you know, you just don't clip past the stay stitching, but since I did not stay stitch it, you know, 1/4 inch is good for me, and you can see that that flattens it all out a lot better. Okay, I'm trying to follow their instructions, and their picture here is a little bit confusing. Well, not so much there, but this little piece right here. So what this looks like to me is that they flattened it out. What that looks like to me is that they came down to that point and then went straight out. And they're two conflicting kind of things. So I'm going more like this type of a look here. And so I get down here and I've pressed my little seams open. But when I want to get that center dot, remember there's a center dot here, okay? I'm putting that center dot in line with my seam and just pinning them flat. Now, you see here, it looks like theirs is flat. Mine, because that center dot, you know, it's shorter. So these edges are wanting to curl in. Okay, so on the outside it looks like this. I think that's fine. You can kind of see it's like a little inverted box pleat kind of thing right there. I think that's fine. I've been looking at this one over here and I'm really not too sure what to make of it. So I'm leaving that alone, and I'm just going to put a little bit of a stitch going straight across here just to hold that in place. And I'm just going to call that good because, you know, some days your brain can interpret things a lot better, some they can't. So I'm just going to do a little quick stitch right here and here. I don't think it's supposed to be visible from the outside. Oh, I bet that's what that means. Okay, I think I figured it out. All right, so we have to stitch straight across here, but it's not visible from the outside. This is what it is. So instead of stitching it on the outside, I'm letting this little flap here be free, stitch a little bit there and a little bit here, which seems like a whole lot of extra work. But you know what, I'll probably just do it with a little needle and thread just to hold it in place. Stitch, stitch, you know, come over here, stitch, stitch, hold it. And that way they should lay flat, but not have a seam on the outside that looks like this. I'm pretty sure that's what they want, so that's what I am going with. I hate to sound so lazy today, but some days you just feel like it, and I don't feel like making these funky little stitches. So what I'm doing is I'm going to shove a little piece of stitch witchery in here, you know, just a little bit, maybe about 1/4 inch deep in there. And I'm going to fuse it in place. Okay, did I fog up my camera? Sorry about that, I need to move the camera. So now that is fused in place. These aren't going to go anywhere. It's not going to be under any strain, so I think it's going to hold its own. And to me, in the mood that I am in right now, that's going to work out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for these other ones also. But if you can see, I know it's a very, very busy fabric right here. It's nice and flat and it's holding its little box shape. And on this side, you know, it's not going to come unfolded, probably ever. And so I'm all good with that. So got that done. Next I'm going to deal with this front facing piece, and I need interfacing on it. And I am just going to use my typical Bargain extremely lightweight interfacing. I don't want it stiff, I just want it to hold its shape, and that is what this stuff will do. So I'm going to fuse it on slightly different than I normally do, so I'll let you watch that, but first let me cut some of this out. Okay, so what I have is a piece of interfacing. It's much bigger than my pieces here. It's with the fusible dots face up, and the reason I'm doing this is that this stuff is that it's that very, very lightweight, easy to misbehave kind of fabric, you know? and add the stretch into it, and that just makes things worse. So I'm going to trim the interfacing off of it after I have it fused on. So I want to make sure that I put it on here so that it's not stretched out in any way, okay? And just kind of laying where it should be, because the job of this interfacing is going to be just to keep it from stretching, okay? So I'm going to iron it this way, but I don't want all of this junk to get onto my iron. So I have a piece of Teflon, you know, just like baking Teflon. I think I got this off of eBay, just, you know, but you can use baking parchment paper, you know, whatever you need to do, you can do it. But if I iron it like this, then I can just peel the Teflon off. You know, I don't get stuff onto my iron, and all is good there. I'm trying not to use a lot of steam here because it doesn't do as well with the Teflon, because it just kind of deflects like that. But if I can get it, the fusibleness to start, you know, it might not be completely set, but if I can get it to start, then I can trim the excess off from around it. You see it just peels off here. Then I can, after this is like, it's set enough that it's going to be stuck to it. Now I can come back with scissors and trim around it and then press it really well with steam and everything. So that's the way I'm doing it, just to make sure that these pieces don't get stretched out of shape before I get a chance to sew it. And once I get done getting all this fused on, I am, since this is the top, you know, we're doing all kinds of different things. The outside edge of my interfacing, or my facing piece, this edge here, okay, it says to finish it off. I'm just going to go ahead and run that edge through my serger, okay, and I'm going to finish it off that way. I don't see a back. There is not a back facing because there's this little collar band. Now the collar band is also going to need interfacing, so I'm going to do a similar process for that. So we're just going to assume that you know what I'm doing, so the next time you see this collar band piece, it's going to have interfacing on just like this. So at this point, this is one of my front pieces, and I'm going to get a interfaced front facing piece. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and match up this front edge. So to stitch this on, the way we're going to do it, move this down here, is there is a dot right here that you cannot see because I did not actually transfer it over there. And it is right here, which is 5/8 of an inch in by about 3/8 of an inch down. And I'm guessing that that's because they're using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the band, which is what I'm hoping, because that would be good. But we're going to be doing our stitching line through this point at 5/8 of an inch all the way down here to the bottom down here, okay, on both of the front pieces. All right, so the facing is sewn on, but we need to understitch it. So the seam allowances are going to go towards the facing side, okay, and on the facing side of the seam, right about here, okay, so here's your seam line. On the facing side of it, just doing a row of straight stitch all the way up right alongside there, you know, 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch in, making sure that you're on top of all of these seam allowances the entire way up. All right, so I've got my understitching in, which is going to really help give me a nice edge this way, so I don't see any stitching here. It's all hidden underneath. And so right now, let me get this situated up top here. What I need to do is set everything up here. So while I have the top of this facing here, I need to make sure I have the edges together. Okay, it's sticking up a little bit. I'm not worried about that. I'm actually going to go ahead and trim that now. sometimes when you understitch things, they shift a little bit, and it is knit. You know, it wants to move as you stitch. So I need to run a row of stitching here, and then straight across here, holding down both my facing and the seam allowances here that are going to that little inverted box pleat kind of thing. So it's going to be like right here, up and over on both of my front pieces. I need to take care of some things in town, so I am going to do this on both of my front pieces, take a break, run into town, take care of some stuff, and I'll be back this afternoon, and hopefully we'll be able to get this done, because it looks like once we get that, it's just sewing on the back pieces and then putting on the collar band. So that's pretty quick. Okay, so welcome back. Got back from being in town taking care of some stuff, and I literally just have this pinned to the front of my dress form, but I think it's enough that we can get an idea of how long it's going to be, you know, which is, you know, right about here. And the pants, you know, are pant length. So I think that that's pretty good. It looks like where this little box pleat is a sufficient amount below full bosom level that it's not going to look awkward, you know. So I think that that's going to be good. And like I said in the beginning, I'm not going to make functioning buttonholes. I'm just going to kind of layer these over each other and sew the buttons all the way through to keep it just permanently closed. But one thing I wanted to point out is, you saw I used the regular lightweight interfacing when I did this. And I'm thinking that I probably should have used a 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐿 fusible interfacing, just because this fabric, it's very lightweight, but it also, you know, it's heavy enough that it wants to drape a bit. So it's almost wanting to make a scene here. It's not, it's nice and smooth, but I feel like it would be better if it had a 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐿 interfacing, which is basically a fusible interfacing that they make specifically for knits. Usually it's in a little pack and everything, and it's the same kind of fabric that I used for my stay tapes. I think I have a pack. Let me look. Okay. Let me show you. This is one of these packs, you know, and I have it. I just didn't choose to use it, but that might have been a better option on knits that are heavier and everything. This is probably good. And I just realized how humid it is outside. Look at that hair. Not going to deal with that anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and unpin the front. And oh, one other thing I did is, remember I had that notch in the bottom where I just cut things wrong. I went ahead and kind of evened it out all the way across. When I get the buttons put on, so that I have a final length where they meet, I'll do a final cutting before I hem it so that, you know, it's somewhat level down here. But anyway, I'm going to take the front off of here, go back to my table, and we're going to get the back piece and sew it here at the shoulder and at the side seam. I believe it's going to be at the regular 5/8 of an inch, and we'll just go from there. Okay, so at this point we have kind of done up to step 7. Now, it wanted you to do double rows of stitching at the shoulders and the side seams. I just did a single row. To me, the top is not going to be under as much strain as the pants could be, you know, knowing me and myself. So I just did a single row of stitching, and then pressed the seam allowances open on the sides. And up here at the shoulders, I don't think we're supposed to press them open. I think they're supposed to go towards the back, okay? Since this is knit and it's not going to fray, I am not worried about, you know, finishing off the edges of everything. I did it on the facing just so that it would secure that interfacing layer to it and everything. But other than that, like these edges here at the seam allowance, I'm just leaving them as is. So that takes us to the neckband area. And we have our stay stitching at the front. They want us to do it along the back too. I'm actually going to fuse some of my little tricot tape that I used on those front slats. I'm going to fuse that around the back just to hold it together. And we're going to be using the neckband pieces. One of them, this one, has interfacing fused to it. The other one, the more limp one, does not. Okay, so let me go fuse the little tricot tape around this back neckline here just to kind of hold it more in place, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got my tape fused around my back neckline here, and I'm looking at their instructions, and it looks like they're going to want you to sew it to the outside first and then flip it to the inside, do a slip stitch thing and all this kind of stuff. I like to do the opposite. I like to sew it to the inside first and then the outside. It just is easier for me. So I'm going to kind of reverse their process. They are going to have you, like down here it shows, the one with this dots on it is the interfaced one, this guy here, and they're going to want you to turn up the bottom edge of the interface one. I'm kind of reversing it, and I'm going to be, in this case, turning up the bottom edge of the non-interfaced one, okay? Now, you can see here, and I need to transfer all of these markings over, so actually let me go ahead and get my little piece of leather and such. The seam allowance that they're going to want you to use is a smaller one. If I measure from the center of that little hole to the cut line, it's 3/8 of an inch. So that's good. A smaller seam allowance is a lot easier to curve around things. So let me get this up here so it's matched up on this one and transfer these markings over. I'm also going to make sure that I transfer over the center back mark, because that'll be helpful for getting everything lined up. And this knit, it just wants to stretch all over. So if I can get the outside edges right, and then I can just kind of settle it in place. Because, yeah, the bottom one has the interfacing on, so it's stable. But look, this top one, it wants to be a little bit longer. See over here? So you know what? Just so I don't need to worry about it, I am going to trim it to this size so everything is the same. Okay. And since I have that there, I'm going to go ahead, put this down, and transfer over my dots. Okay, at my center back, I'll put a little line at the bottom and a little line up here at the top, and just connect that later. And over here, the end dot, and there are a couple notches on here, but I'm actually going to be focusing more on the dots than the notches. Okay, so this is my center back here. All right, this is where the edge of my front piece needs to line up. So this little edge here is going to line up with where that dot is there. Okay, and so you can see that little seam allowance peeking out. This dot here should be the shoulder point. I'm also on the back of my blouse thing. I need to mark the center back. So I am just, but while I have it sitting here, I'm going to fold it in half, put a line right there. So I have the center back marked. Okay, but between those two, this is a short distance. I can make this work. So, like I said, instead of folding up the interfaced one, and I'm not going to do it the entire way, I'm just folding up the non-interfaced one about 3/8 of an inch on each side. Okay, I'm gonna turn this in here. I'm gonna turn one in over here, and then stitch these two layers together. Okay, and I think it should show it right here, where I'm going to sew it at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance from this point, you know, keeping this one folded up, over, and then down here locking in this little fold turned up. Okay, this stuff is a pain to deal with. you know, just saying. It really is. It's not my fabric of choice. I don't plan on using it again in the near future. Just letting that out there. But, gotta finish this collar. So I'm gonna take my piece that has the interfacing on it, lining up the right side of it to the wrong side of my neck, my back neck here. I'm lining up the center back first. Okay, then I'm going to come all the way over here to the edge and put this edge here so that it is just inside where this seam line is, right there, okay? And pin that together. And then I'm just going to stretch it out and make everything meet in the middle, which it is quite nicely. It looks like the actual shoulder line is maybe about an inch back from where the little shoulder seam is, which, you know, sometimes that happens. It's a style thing. And I'm just going to pin this on. Now, they want you to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which is good, and I can tell I did not fuse my interfacing on very well, but when I stitch it, it'll hold it. But when I was sewing my little stay stitching in the very front, up here, where I was doing this little number, I did that closer to 5/8. So that little seam line, it's gonna show, just letting you know, it's gonna show. If it really bothers me after I put this on, I can pick those stitches out. But for right now, I am not going to worry about that. I'm just going to get the rest of this pinned on. And once I have it pinned, I'm going to sew right along here at about 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so I've got it sewn on here. You can see what the instructions want you to do. Actually, they wanted you to do it before you sewed it on, which was understitch this top edge here. I want my understitching stitches to be on the interface side because that's going to be the inside, okay? The outside is going to be my non-interface side. So what I'm going to do is run back to my machine, push all of these little seam allowances probably from this top point here, you know, as much as I can, and just stitch. Well, I'll be looking at the outside edge here. So making sure my seam allowances are poked underneath this part, okay? I'm doing a row of stitches right about here, all the way down. That's going to help this have a better edge at the top. And again, I should have done that before I sewed it onto the shirt, but you know, live and learn. Alrighty, so with the understitching in now, this is my right side, obviously, my center back. I can just turn it over, turn the little raw edge under about 1/4 inch or so, and then just place it so it's covering just barely the little seam that made this on right there, okay? So out here at the edge, I'm just going to turn it, tuck all of that little stuff in at the corner here, and pull my little raw edge down. I have a piece of thread sticking out. I will trim that later. And I know that other little seam line is showing there. I'll probably pick it out later, but for right now, I'm just going to ignore it and pin my little edge here in place. Just ignore that little thread for now. Okay, so you want it so that this is fairly straight right here. Now, the reason that I like to do it basically inside out is so that now, once I have this all pinned up exactly where I want it, on the outside, you know, looking at the outside of it and everything, I can come back and just kind of top stitch it in place so I can see exactly where my row of stitching is going to be. So that is how I'm going to close all of this up, you know, just a row of edge stitching from one side to the other, just barely inside this little fold. So I don't know, I hope you can see, but this stuff, it really wants to stretch. And so I don't want it to stretch out of shape while I'm doing this. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a little pin and just in front of my presser foot, pushing it down. So I know at least in that little spot it's staying where it needs to. And that way If it does want to make a pucker or something, it's a tiny pucker because it only has, you know, so far to go. So that is what I would suggest. Move that little light over, maybe you can see better. It's just kind of patiently working your way through it, because this is fairly thick and it is a lot of just really lightweight knit there. But that way I can kind of, if you can see, move my light this way, maybe, so I can kind of form it so it's just going to go straight across the bottom there. So that's my only suggestion I have for right now. Okay, so I've got my collar on here. I still need to press it, but it's on. I think it's fine. It's not perfect. I like woven so much better than these really lightweight knits. Heavier knits are easier to deal with. This one is just, ugh. I know it was cheap. This is the cheapest knit fabric in the world. What did I pay? I paid like $8 for 3 yards or something. Cheap, cheap. I thought it was a pretty color. You know, it's okay for pajamas, but I would not make a garment out of it because it just, it doesn't feel right, you know. But anyway, what I still need to do is the armholes, hemming it, put the buttons on. And they're going to want you to use a binding tape around the armholes. I'm toying with the idea of just turning them in as a hem. I think that that would be good. But I need to leave the house. I've got something very exciting I need to go and take care of. I'll let you know when I get back. And then we will deal with this probably tomorrow. So have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Hello everybody, I am back and it is the next day, and my big excitement last night is I was able to go and pick up my new little rescue dog. I will show a picture at the end, but she's adorable. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time today up here in my sewing room. I want to go downstairs and help her get acclimated as much as possible. Now they want you to use a band, so I have one idea I'm going to bring to the table and give a shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I have my tricot tape here, okay? It is somewhat flexible. And what I was thinking is, if instead of bias tape, because honestly bias tape in general is a woven and it's stiffer, and I don't feel like cutting this, you know, misbehaving fabric into little 2-inch strips. So what I was thinking is, if I took my tricot tape, not fusing it on, you know, sewing it so the non-fusible side is up against my fabric, and kind of using that as a tape, sewing this edge at a 1/4-inch seam allowance all the way around and encasing that, so then I can just fold it to the inside. And this will help me to give a nice finish inside. That's what I'm thinking. I'm going to go over to my machine, give it a shot. We'll see how it works. I want to show you generally how I'm doing this, because this is in general a straight piece of tricot. And again, the fusible side is on top, the non-fusible side is what's up against my right side. So I am just using the edge of my regular presser foot as a guide to get approximately a 1/4-inch seam allowance. And when I get to the point here, excuse me, bumping things, when I get to the point where the fabric's turning, I'm just kind of rotating it like that so I can keep holding my little strip straight, you know, and working my way around. In the very beginning, I left about 1/2 inch of this tape loose so that when I get all the way around, I can just fold it back and overlap it, and that way I'll have a nice edge on the outside. Okay, so at this point, you know, this is the wrong side, that's the right side, that's what it looks like. So basically, I am just folding this over and tucking the end of my little tape underneath the seam allowance, and then folding it back. And I'm going to put a row of stitching straight down here. My tape is only 1 inch wide, so that works really well. This one I already did, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It actually makes a really nice edge, and it doesn't get that funky pucker kind of thing that you get sometimes when you're just trying to do a regular hem, you know, since it is having a band on the inside. But no, I like it. I think this is going to work, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up the other armhole, and I need to go pick out some buttons for this blouse. Okay, so I've got my little armholes done. I have not hemmed to the bottom yet, but I've just kind of loosely pinned this overlap here. Here's my neck opening. I've just put some pins where the overlap is. It comes with a button guide, which you set right here where this curve is. And it gives you placement for, I think, 5 buttons. I'm going to do 4. I have these 4 that I'm just sewing on. Again, no buttonholes. So the very bottom one, you know, would I be buttoning the very bottom one anyway? Probably not. So I'm just going to loosely transfer over by putting a pin at the center point of these top 4 here. And then I'm going to take a needle and thread and my buttons and go downstairs and sit with the new arrival. Keep an eye on her. I can tell that she's a bit nervous down there, so I'm going to run down there and do that. And once I have all of these 4 buttons sewn on, that's going to permanently keep this front closed. And then all we'll need to do is hem the bottom. Okie dokie, so I have my buttons put on. Again, I just used the 4 because, you know, I'm probably never going to button anything down this low. Now I'm going to go ahead and just hem the bottom by hand because, you know, I want to sit back down there with the puppies. But I want to show you the way I'm going to do it. See how this one is folded in? Basically, I just am folding up the edge like a fat 1/2 inch up, and then turning this over. Oh, I have a totally wrong angle here. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can flatten this out. Well, you kind of have the idea of what I want. If this is like a fat 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch type thing, and I can just lay that down so it's going to be like this. And then as I'm sewing it, this part, I'm just going to tuck in the edge. So it's just going to end up being, you know, a decent little narrow hem. And I'm just going to stitch that by hand all the way around, just so I can sit down there on the sofa with the puppies. And then that's going to be it. Okay, hang on, let me turn on a light. It is hot outside, so I did not want to go and stand outside in my yard in my new pajamas, you know. So here's my final analysis. I think it's cute. I think it's comfortable. I think this fabric was a pain in the neck to use, but it was the right price. Plus, it's actually very comfortable. It was just, you know, that really, really thin weight knit can be problematic. We worked through it. And I don't know if you saw, but when I just had this up on my dress form, the hem down here in the corners, it was all bunchy and weird. I hemmed it while I was sitting on my sofa there, so I didn't have it pinned properly. You know, the pinning the little facing layer with the over part. I had a little skewed so it bubbled, so I had to, on this under part, unpick it, replace it, and sew it again. So fix that. But yeah, I think it's a great little jammies. I'm happy with it. I'm going to clip my little microphone over here because I want to show you my new little puppy. I'm going to come over here. I think the lighting might be a little bit different. So this is our new little dog. Oh, lighting, lighting. Sorry about this. Okay, I think you can see her here. This is Misty. She's probably about 5 years old. She's a little rescue from a little puppy mill. She was a breeder for several years and then they were done with her, so I got her from a shelter and I'm very, very pleased with her. She's a sweet little thing. So this is why I wanted to hurry up and get finished yesterday, because I wanted to go get her, and I've been trying to get her acclimated to the house and everything like that. So she's doing great. She's doing really good. So anyhow, this is actually the second outfit I've made for this week, and I am pushing it. It is Wednesday afternoon. I'm usually done and edited by now. But the first one I made was actually a quilted wool jacket. And hang on, I have another jealous baby here. And after I made it and I edited that video, I was thinking, you know what, it's still hot outside, and absolutely no one is going to want to watch a video on a quilted wool jacket at the end of August when it's hot. So since I needed jammies anyway, here we are. So I hope you liked it. Sometime in the near future, as soon as the weather turns a bit, I'll be publishing my quilted wool jacket, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, every city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and move the horses into the barn. Then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful farmhouses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.